and people think I have the best job in the world. You could pay to eat, Ananya? What a life. They say it at parties, in emails, even my own mother. They don't get it. Not really. For me, it's never been about just good food. My job, my whole life, is about finding the truth. Is this real? And the person who can tell you if the line-caught sea bass on your $200 plate was actually frozen and farmed in a tank in Vietnam. I can tell you if the Himalayan pink salt is just dyed table salt from a warehouse in New Jersey. I'm a food critic for the global standard, which sounds way more glamorous than it is. Mostly it's just me, sitting alone, chewing very, very slowly, and trying to find the lie. I can taste the difference between butter from grass-fed Normandy cows and grain-fed Irish cows. I can tell you the specific valley a Pinot Noir grape was grown in just from the finish. My palate is my identity. It's the only thing I've ever had that is 100% reliable. This obsession, it's a whole thing. You're probably thinking I'm nuts. I get it. It's a lot. You have to understand, I wasn't always this intense. I used to just enjoy food. But then, about 8 years ago, there was the incident. That's what I call it in my head. I reviewed this restaurant in Chicago, Livray, The Truth. God, the irony. I gave it a perfect review, a perfect score. I wrote about the ethereal whisper of saffron and the deep woodland floor notes of the truffle. I called the chef a genius. I mean, my review made him. It put him on the global map. A year later, an insider blew the whistle. It was all fake. All of it. The saffron was a synthetic compound, a chemical dye. The truffle was a few drops of 2,4-diphthiapentane, a petroleum byproduct, mixed into cheap grapeseed oil. The chef was a chemist, not a chef. A brilliant, total fraud. He didn't just fool the public. He fooled me, my palate. The one thing I have, the one thing I've built my entire life on. He made me a liar. I told millions of people to go eat a lie, and I called it perfection. That messed me up. Bad. For a long time. But after the shame wore off, it just left this cold, hard obsession. Never again. I will never be fooled again. I have to know the source. Which brings me to my current assignment, the big one. The global standard is sending me to review Sanguine, the most exclusive, most mysterious restaurant on the planet. You can't book a table. You are invited. It's run by this reclusive genius, Chef Camilla, who nobody has really seen. An assignment like this, it's the ultimate test. My chance to find the real truth, to prove to myself that my palate is still pure. Looking back, I really, really wish I'd refused the assignment. I wish I'd just stayed home. Because I went to Sanguine. I did find the source. And the truth is, some flavors, you're much, much better off not knowing where they come from.
I walk into Sanguine and it's not what you'd expect. No gold, no luxury. It was quiet, minimalist. Polished concrete floors, dark mahogany walls, single flickering candles on tables spaced way too far apart. It felt more like a chapel than a restaurant. It was hushed. The air was cool and smelled faintly of something I couldn't place. Something sweet and metallic. And then Chef Camila came out, not to the room, just to my table. She was exactly what you'd picture, but more so. Mid-40s, pristine white uniform with no wrinkles, hair pulled back in a bun so tight it looked like it hurt. She was intense but charismatic. She smiled, but her eyes were cold, analytical, like she was deconstructing me. "Welcome, Miss Rao," she said, her voice quiet and hypnotic. "We are so honored. We are here to serve the truth of the ingredient. Nothing else." The food. God, the food. It was transcendent. Every flavor was a high C. Clear, perfect, pure. A carrot dish that tasted more like a carrot than any carrot I'd ever eaten. A fish that tasted like the deep, cold ocean itself. I've never tasted anything like it. My review practically wrote itself. I remember typing a religious experience. But there was one thing. One tiny, nagging thing that stopped it from being perfect, and instead made it haunting. Her signature dish. A simple piece of seared something. She called it the essence. And it came with this dark, ruby red sauce. It was incredible. It was sweet, savory, coppery. It had a finish that just buzzed. It lit up my whole palate, made me feel a little euphoric even, warm. And I had no idea what it was. Me, Ananya Rao, the palate, couldn't identify an ingredient. My review was a sensation. The restaurant was rocketed into the stratosphere, and I was a hero. But privately, I was a wreck. It drove me nuts. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep. I'd go to other chefs, friends of mine, the best in the world. I'd describe it. It's sweet, but not like sugar. It's coppery, like a faint metallic but velvet finish. And it's warm. It makes you feel warm. They all looked at me like I was crazy. Sounds like a high-end demi-glace, Ananya, maybe with some exotic fruit. It's not a demi-glace. I'd snap at them. It wasn't. It was something new. I tried to replicate it myself. For 2 solid weeks, my apartment kitchen looked like a disaster zone. I tried every spice, every reduction, every animal, aged venison, duck, rare mushrooms. Nothing came close. This is the bad part. One night, I was working late. I'd been reducing a venison stock for about 12 hours. I was exhausted, frustrated, and just angry. I was chopping herbs, not paying attention, and my best knife slipped. I nicked my thumb deep. It bled. A lot. I cursed, rushed to the sink, but not before a few drops, a lot of drops, dripped right into the simmering stock. I was about to throw the whole pot out. It was contaminated, ruined, but I stopped. I don't know why. I was just so tired. I walked back to the stove. The blood had cooked into the sauce. It was darker now. I leaned in just to smell it. My head swam. That smell! It wasn't right. It smelled good. I dipped a spoon in. My hand was shaking. I told myself, don't be an idiot, Ananya. This is insane. But I had to know. I tasted it, and oh God, it wasn't the same. Not exactly. But for the first time, it was close. That was the scare. Not a monster. Not a ghost. Just me in my own kitchen at 3 a.m. with a bloody thumb stock and a spoon, and I'm thinking, it needs more salt. I threw up for 10 minutes straight. I poured the stock down the drain and ran the garbage disposal for a full minute. I bleached the pot. I bleached the whole kitchen. I went into denial. Total. It was a fluke, I told myself, scrubbing my hands raw. I was tired. I was projecting. The iron in my blood just mimicked the flavor profile. I was rationalizing, just like I did with Livray all those years ago. I was lying to myself again, because the alternative was unthinkable. It couldn't be. People don't do that. Not in a world-famous, celebrated restaurant. But my palate, my damned traitorous palate, it wouldn't let me rest. It kept whispering. It was close. It was so close. But I had to know. I couldn't just accuse the world's greatest chef of that. Not based on a kitchen accident and a sick feeling. I had to be sure. My sanity depended on it. My identity depended on it. I had to know if I was a critic or if I was an accomplice. I started investigating her suppliers. I pulled every string I had. I called in favors from importers I'd known for a decade. I tried to trace her supply chain. Where was she getting her game, her heirloom produce? It was all a dead end. Her main supplier, the one for her most exclusive ingredients, was a company called Sanguis Logistics. Totally blank. No website, no address, just a P.O. box in a state I'd never heard of. The food just appeared. The invoices were vague, just listing specialty meats and proprietary essence. I was going crazy. I wasn't sleeping. My review was being quoted everywhere, and all I could taste was that taste. I'd be eating a salad, and the metallic tang of the vinaigrette would make me gag. I was jumpy, paranoid. I felt like Livray was happening all over again, but this time, the lie wasn't a chemical. The lie was something so much worse. So I did the only thing I could. I called Chef Camilla's private number, the one she'd given me, in case you ever need to discuss the truth. Chef? I said, my voice trying to be steady. Ananya Rao. I'm doing a follow-up piece for The Standard on your philosophy, on the source. There was this long, cold silence on the line. Not a let me check my schedule silence, a knowing silence. I could just hear her breathing, slow and even. Then her voice, smooth as velvet. Ananya, of course. I've been expecting you. Your palate is everything they say it is. You felt it, didn't you? The truth. My blood ran cold. Why don't you come back? A private demonstration, just for you. You can see the source of everything. That was it. The point of no return. An invitation. Or a trap. I knew in my gut this was a bad idea. Every rational part of my brain screamed to go to the police, go to your editor. But my obsession, that old wound, I couldn't say no. I had to see the truth. I had to know once and for all what I had told the world to eat. So I said, I'll be there tonight. I'm writing this in my car, parked about a block away from Sanguine. It's late after midnight. The street is empty. The restaurant is dark except for a single light way in the back, probably the kitchen. She's waiting for me. I'm going in. If I don't come back, I'm sorry, but I have to know. I got out of the car. The street was so quiet, my footsteps echoed, sharp and loud in the night air. I pushed open the heavy mahogany door. It wasn't locked. The dining room was dark. Candles out, chairs all neatly stacked. The silence was thick, heavy. The only light came from the stainless steel double door to the kitchen, a single bright line, and the smell. It was that sauce, that coppery, sweet, intoxicating smell. It was wafting through the whole restaurant, much stronger than before. It made my mouth water, which made me want to be sick. "Chef," I called out. My voice sounded small and thin. The double doors swung open with a hiss. Camila was standing there. Her pristine white uniform was spotless. She was holding a single glass of deep red wine. She smiled, but it was just her mouth. Her eyes were those same cold, analytical eyes. "Ananya, you're right on time," she said, her voice a hypnotic purr. "Come, you wanted to see the demonstration." I followed her into the kitchen. It was immaculate. I mean, you could perform surgery in there. Every surface was polished steel, reflecting the harsh white overhead lights. It smelled of bleach and that other thing, that sauce, simmering in a massive copper pot on the stove. "You're a purist, Ananya," she said, walking slowly toward the back. "Like me, you understand that all great flavor comes from the source, the life." She stopped at a heavy stainless steel door in the back wall. It looked like a walk-in freezer. "You wrote that my food was transcendent," she said, her hand on the latch. "You were right, but you couldn't figure out why. It's been killing you, hasn't it?" I just stared. I couldn't speak. "The incident, le vrai," she said. My blood went cold. How did you know about that?" "I know everything about you, Ananya. I know you're terrified of being fooled. You came here, to me, looking for the truth." She smiled. "He fooled you with chemicals, a cheap, tawdry lie. My truth is organic. It's the oldest truth there is." She pulled the heavy latch. The door hissed open, releasing a cloud of frigid air that smelled of iron. "This," she said, "is a demonstration." I walked in. It was a larder, a huge refrigerated room. The walls were lined with steel shelves, but there was no food. There were bags, dozens of them, clear plastic bags like IV drips, but larger, all filled with a dark ruby red liquid. Each one was labeled with a clean type sticker from Sanguine Logistics. My stomach just dropped. The cold metallic hum of the refrigeration unit was the only sound. What is this?" I whispered. But I knew. Oh God, I knew. My palate knew. My body knew. "It's the ultimate ingredient," Camila said, filled with passion. "The life force you tasted. It's what makes the sauce fuzz. It's what you felt. You can't replicate it. You can't fake it. It is everything." I looked at a bag. The liquid was thick, viscous. "Blood," I whispered. My legs were shaking. "Human blood?" "Of course," she said, like she was explaining what flour was. "Nothing else has this complexity. This is the source, Ananya." And that's when it all hit me. The two, the incident and this, they just slammed together in my head. The ray, the fraud, the chemicals, my humiliation, and Sanguine, the truth, the religious experience. I ate this?" I said, pointing a shaking finger at the bag. "You raved about it," she corrected me, her voice cold. "I told them to eat this." My voice was a raw croak. "I told millions of people." My fear, it wasn't about monsters. It was about this
this exact moment. The horrifying realization that my greatest gift, my palate, it wasn't just old, it was a liar. It had been an enthusiastic, unwitting accomplice. I was a participant in this grotesque taboo. I wasn't just the victim of a fraud. I was the high priestess. I turned to run. I had to get out. I had to tell someone. I shoved past her, back into the kitchen. I slipped on the polished concrete floor, caught myself on a steel table. "You can't leave me, Ananya," she said. She was right behind me. I scrambled. I grabbed a heavy copper pot and just threw it. It clanged against the wall. She didn't even yell. She just lunged. She was a chef. She was strong. I was a writer. I tried to get to the door, but she grabbed my arm. Her grip was like steel. "My secret is safe, Ananya." She hissed, her face close to mine. "My source is safe." I saw her other hand come up. She was holding a heavy steel saute pan, not a knife, a tool for subduing. The first hit was to my temple. A bright, white, hot pain fell. My head hit the steel table leg. The last thing I smelled was the bleach and that sweet, coppery sauce. The last thing I saw was her pristine white uniform, not a single drop on it. Then black.
A week later, Sanguine is fully booked. There's a hushed reverence in the dining room. A new critic, the one who took over the Global Standards top spot after Ananya Rao's tragic, sudden disappearance, is at the best table. He's a younger man, more impressed by the theater of it all, less obsessed with the why and more with the wow. The restaurant is buzzing with the news of Ananya's vanishing act. Some say a breakdown, some say she just left. The mystique has only grown. Chef Camilla herself brings out the signature dish. The critic is honored. She leans in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "A new refinement for our most honored guests," she says. "A vintage I've been cellaring. It's very special. I call it the critic's cut." The critic smiles, flattered. He takes a bite. His eyes close. He's silent for a full minute. The sauce is beyond words. It has a complexity he's never known, a sharp, intelligent finish that almost seems to speak to him. It's like nothing he has ever tasted. He picks up his pen. "Perfection," he murmurs, writing it down. "Pure, unadulterated truth." He notes the flavor. A subtle, complex, almost poetic new note he can't quite identify. Something familiar, though he can't place it. He writes, "Chef Camilla has done the impossible. She has improved upon perfection." He titles his review, "The Truest Meal."
You probably know my name, or at least you've seen my face smiling smugly from the back of those glossy food magazines while you wait for a root canal. I'm Joseph Ross, the man with the golden palate, the guy who once wrote a 3-page essay on the texture of a boiled egg that made a chef in Paris quit his job. People think I have the best life in the world. I fly first class, I eat at restaurants where the waiting list is longer than most marriages, and I get paid a fortune to complain about the wine pairing. But right now, I'm not sitting in a 3-star Michelin dining room with a napkin on my lap. I'm standing in mud that goes up to my ankles, sweating through a linen shirt that costs more than your car. We're about 5 kilometers deep into this godforsaken rainforest. I don't even know which country we're technically in anymore because the borders get really blurry when you're this far off the map. It's 35 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is so thick it feels like I'm breathing hot soup. I have 3 guides with me, locals who don't speak any English, which is fine by me because I'm not here to make friends. I'm here for it, the Helix Aeterna. To the scientific community, it's a myth. To the locals, it's bad luck. To me, it's the Holy Grail. It's a snail, supposedly, but not the kind you drown in garlic butter and parsley. This thing is rare, unique. They say its slime has a neurotoxic quality that, if prepared correctly, doesn't kill you. It unlocks taste buds you didn't even know you had. It supposedly lets you taste color. My guides look terrified. They keep stopping, pointing at the canopy, whispering things I don't understand. I just wave my hand and point forward. I promise them double the money if we find it before sundown. I'm tired, I'm bitten by bugs, and my knees are killing me. But I'm not turning back. I spent 6 months tracking this rumor. I'm not going home empty-handed. I take a swig from my canteen. Warm water. Disgusting. I spit it out into the ferns. I need something real.
You might think I'm crazy for doing this, dragging myself through a jungle at 40 years old, risking malaria for a mollusk, but you don't understand what it's like to be me. See, here's the thing about perfection. It gets boring really, really fast. I come from money, the kind of money that means you never have to hear the word no. My parents died when I was 20, leaving me a fortune and a total lack of direction. So I started eating. At first it was fun. I traveled to Tokyo, Paris, Lima. I ate the still beating heart of a cobra in Vietnam. I ate cheese that was aged in caves for 50 years. I've eaten things that represent the absolute peak of human culinary achievement. And that's the problem. About 5 years ago, I hit a wall. I was sitting in a restaurant in Copenhagen, eating a dish that had won every award on the planet. It was perfect. The texture, the temperature, the balance of acid and fat, it was technically flawless. And I felt nothing. It tasted like cardboard. Not because the food was bad, but because I had experienced it all before. My brain had mapped every flavor combination possible. Salty, sweet, sour, bitter, umami. I had exhausted them all. Do you know how terrifying that is? To realize that nothing will ever surprise you again? To know that the rest of your life is just going to be a series of disappointing meals until you die? That boredom, it's a physical weight. It sits in my chest like a stone. It makes me mean, it makes me cruel. I started writing vicious reviews just to feel something, just to see the chefs cry, because their pain was at least new. But it wasn't enough. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm hunting this snail. I found it just as the sun was dipping below the canopy, painting the jungle in bruises of purple and black. It was clinging to the underside of a fern, the Helix Aeterna. It was larger than I expected, the size of a man's fist, with a shell that swirled in iridescent patterns that seemed to move even when I held it still. The guides refused to touch it. They backed away, making signs against evil, their eyes wide and white in the gloom. I laughed at them. Superstition is just the fear of the uneducated. I didn't wait to get back to camp. I didn't wait to prepare a fire. The urgency was a claw in my gut. I took out my ceremonial knife, Damascus steel, custom handle, and I did what I came to do. Raw. That's how you taste the truth of a thing. The texture was revolting, rubbery, slick, fighting against my teeth. But then the flavor hit. It wasn't like food. It was like an electric shock to the tongue. It tasted like copper, like ozone, like the smell of the air right before a tornado touches down. It was violent. It was aggressive. It was the most incredible thing I had ever put in my mouth. For about 30 seconds, I was a god. I could feel every nerve ending in my body singing. Then the singing turned into a scream. My stomach cramped so hard I dropped to my knees in the mud. It wasn't just nausea. It felt like my insides were trying to untie themselves. The world tilted on its axis. The trees began to elongate, stretching up like prison bars. The sound of the jungle, the insects, the birds became a deafening roar like a jet engine inside my skull. I tried to call out to the guides, but my tongue felt too big for my mouth. My vision tunneled. The last thing I saw was the mud rushing up to meet my face. And the last thing I thought was, at least it wasn't bland. Waking up wasn't like waking up. It was more like being poured back into a container that didn't fit. I didn't open my eyes immediately. I couldn't. I felt exposed. That's the only word for it. Imagine having a sunburn, the kind that blisters, and then having someone drag sandpaper across it. Now imagine that sensation is over every single millimeter of your body. The air itself hurt. A gentle breeze felt like a knife slash. The humidity, which I had complained about earlier, was now the only thing keeping me from feeling like I was burning alive. I tried to stand up. I couldn't. My legs weren't there. I don't mean they were numb. I mean the neural pathways that told me how to bend a knee or flex a foot were just gone. Instead, there was a vast, undulating muscle underneath me. A foot? No, a soul. A massive, wet soul. I forced my eyes open, or what I thought were my eyes. My vision was split, disjointed. I wasn't seeing the jungle from 6 feet up. I was seeing the individual grains of dirt. I was seeing the intricate veins of a rotting leaf 2 centimeters from my face. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, just a wet, rasping noise. I looked down, or I tried to. My field of vision swiveled on stalks. I saw my body. It was gray. It was glistening with a thick, viscous mucus. And on my back, a crushing weight, a spiral prison. I wasn't a man anymore. I was meat, soft, unprotected, vulnerable meat, dragging a house of bone on my back. The horror wasn't immediate. It was a slow, creeping freeze. I was trapped in this impossible biology, fully conscious, fully Joseph, but reduced to a smear of slime on the jungle floor. Denial is a powerful drug. For the first hour, or maybe it was days, time felt slippery now. I convinced myself this was a hallucination. The neurotoxin. It had to be. I was lying in a hospital somewhere, tripping out of my mind. But the pain was too specific. The way the sharp edge of a pebble sliced into my underbelly as I dragged myself forward, that was too real for a dream. Hunger clawed at me. Not the gourmet hunger I used to cultivate, but a desperate animal need. I smelled something sweet, something rotting. To my old nose, it would have been repulsive. To this body, it was ambrosia, bioluminescent fungus, glowing faintly blue in the twilight. I needed it. I began the agonizing process of inching toward it. Contract, extend, slide, pain. Contract, extend, slide, pain. It was humiliating. The great Joseph Ross, reduced to licking fungus off a log. I was halfway there when the ground shook. To you it would have been a footstep. To me was an earthquake. Thud, thud. Vibrations rippled through my slime, sending shockwaves of nausea through me. Something huge was coming. I froze. My instincts, new, terrified instincts, screamed at me to retract, to hide in my shell. But I couldn't look away. Through the ferns, a pair of boots appeared. Expensive leather. Italian. Custom made for trekking, but styled for the runway. I knew those boots. I had bought them in Milan 3 years ago. My eye stalks swiveled up past the khaki trousers, up past the linen shirt, sweat-stained and expensive, up to the face. It was me. Not me as I am now, me as I was. The Joseph of yesterday, the Joseph of 5 days ago. The timeline was broken. He stood there, towering over the clearing like a titan. He looked tired, angry, and arrogant. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. And then he stopped. He looked down. He looked right at me. He didn't see me, though. He didn't see the terror in the way my eye stalks trembled. He didn't see a human soul trapped in a grotesque shell. He saw an ingredient. His eyes, my eyes, lit up with that predatory gleam I knew so well. It was the look I gave a waiter when the main course finally arrived. Finally, the giant boomed, his voice thunderous, shaking the leaves around me. There you are. He reached for his belt. He pulled out the Damascus steel knife. I tried to scream. I tried to shout, "Stop! It's me! You idiot! It's you!" But all I did was bubble. He took a step closer, his shadow swallowing my entire world. I had spent my whole life hunting for the perfect taste, and now I was about to find out exactly what it feels like to be the main course.
You have no idea how hot a human hand is. When I reached down, it wasn't like being touched. It was like being wrapped in a scorching, dry blanket. The ridges of his fingerprints felt like tire tracks grinding against my sensitive skin. I felt the calluses, rough as sandpaper, scraping against the mucus that was my only protection. The world lurched. Gravity reversed. I was hoisted into the air, spinning sickeningly. I tried to retreat into my shell, jamming my soft, fluid body into the tight spiral of bone. But there was nowhere deep enough to go. Through the opening of my shell, I saw the face. My face. Up close, it was monstrous. Pores the size of craters. Stubble that looked like a forest of black wire. And the smell. God, the smell. I always prided myself on my hygiene, but from this proximity, I smelled like stale coffee, dead animal, and chemical musk. It was suffocating.
Beautiful,
The giant whispered. His breath was a hurricane of hot, humid rot. I felt the steel blade of the knife pry at the edge of my operculum, the trapdoor of my shell. I pull it tighter, every muscle in my gelatinous body screaming in panic. I wanted to beg. I wanted to tell him that I had money, that I knew the secrets of the universe, that I was him. But I was just a snack. The knife slipped away. He wasn't going to cut me. He was a purist. He wanted the full experience. The hand moved higher. The sky was blocked out by the cavernous opening of his mouth. I saw the tongue, a massive, wet pink slab shifting impatiently. I saw the teeth, white, square tombstones designed for crushing. Please, I thought, please, I'm not food. He tilted his head back. I slid. I hit the tongue with a wet slap. It was slimy and impossibly hot, searing my skin like acid. A river of saliva, thick, enzymatic, disgusting, flooded over me, burning my eyes, drowning my breath. I thrashed. I bit the tongue with my tiny, rasping mouth, desperate to make him stop, to make him spit me out. He just frowned. He probably thought I was spicy. Then came the roof of the mouth, hard, ridged, and from below, the jaw began to close. The pressure was absolute. It wasn't pain at first. It was just math. His jaw strength against my shell's structural integrity. I heard the crack before I felt it, a sound like a gunshot inside a cathedral. My home shattered. Shards of calcium drove into my soft flesh. And then the teeth met the meat. It wasn't a quick death. It was an explosion of sensory data. I felt my own body being pulped, my nerves firing every signal they had at once. Heat, pressure, acid, tearing. But beneath the physical agony, there was something worse. As his teeth sunk into me, I felt a connection, a spark. I tasted him, and he tasted me.
I spat it out. I didn't mean to. It was a reflex, violent and immediate. I gagged, retching, bending double as the masticated lump of shell and gray meat splattered onto the jungle floor. My guides jumped back, startled. I wiped my mouth, trembling. It wasn't the texture. I've eaten things with the texture of snot before. It wasn't the poison. It was the flavor. It didn't taste like wild garlic, or ozone, or any of the exotic things the rumors had promised. It tasted like despair. It tasted like a lonely apartment in New York filled with expensive furniture nobody sits on. It tasted like the silence after a funeral. It tasted like the moment you realize you've wasted 40 years of your life chasing a high that doesn't exist. It was the most bitter thing I had ever experienced. I stood there, gasping for air, staring at the ruined mess in the dirt. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. "Mr. Ross?" one of the guides asked. Is good?" I looked at him. I looked at the jungle, which suddenly seemed just like a bunch of wet trees. I looked at my hands, the hands of a killer, the hands of a glutton. "No," I croaked. My voice sounded thin like wind blowing through a dead valley. "No, it's finished." I left the jungle that day. I left the guides. I left the equipment. I flew back to civilization, back to my penthouse, back to my awards. But I never ate again. Not really. I put food in my mouth, I chew, I swallow. But there's no joy. There's no spark. Every truffle, every vintage wine, every perfectly seared steak, it all just tastes like ash. Because underneath it all,
I can still taste that snail. I can still feel the phantom sensation of a shell cracking between my teeth. And in the quiet moments, right before I fall asleep, I can feel the ghost of a scream trapped in my throat. A scream that isn't mine, but belongs to something small, slimy, and infinitely sad. I just wanted to live. And they hunted myself down, and I won. And now, I am starving to death.
You've probably seen my show, The Rarest Palate. You've seen me on magazine covers, holding some impossibly exotic ingredients, smiling that smile they paint you so well for. They call me a genius, a visionary. They see my penthouse kitchen all gleaming chrome and sterile white quartz, and they talk about my dedication, my artistry. It's all nonsense. It's not about art. It was never about art. It's about control. In my kitchen, every single thing is under my command. The air is filtered 3 times to eliminate any stray urban particulates. The water is sourced from a specific Icelandic glacier and remineralized to my exact specifications, 7.8 pH, with a total dissolved solids count of precisely 60 parts per million. My knives, forged from Japanese blue steel, are sharpened every evening to a precise 14-degree angle. Here in my temple of glass and steel overlooking the city, there are no variables. There are no mistakes. There is only what I decree. I can take a single perfect strawberry and I can tell you the mineral content of the soil it grew in, whether it was picked in the morning or the afternoon, and if the farmer's heart was broken that season. This isn't a party trick. It is the core of who I am. My palate is the most refined instrument on the planet, and I have built an empire on that single, verifiable fact. But that empire is built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated shame. 20 years ago, I wasn't a titan of the culinary world. I was just a talented kid with a bit of buzz, pouring everything I had into a small, ambitious restaurant. I was passionate. I was happy, I think. Then came Antoine Dubois, a rival chef, older, with the kind of establishment credentials I craved. He came to a tasting I held for the city's top critics, an event that was meant to be my coronation. I had spent a month perfecting a clear mushroom consomme. It was meant to be my masterpiece, a transparent, impossibly fragrant broth that held the very soul of the earth. I had clarified it 6 times through chief cloth and egg whites until it was as clear as spring water. Antoine took a single, deliberate sip from the delicate porcelain spoon. He let the silence in the room stretch until it was thin and sharp enough to cut you. Then he set the spoon down, looked not at me, but at the most influential critic in the room, and chuckled. It was a small, dismissive sound that echoed louder than a gunshot. "Afe Reffert," he said, his voice dripping with a condescending pity that was worse than any insult. "But the boy has an unrefined palate. He's seasoning over imperfections only a true chef can taste. A fraud." The word hung in the air. Fraud. Something inside me broke that day. The simple joy I found in flavor, the love for the craft, it curdled into something cold and hard. It was no longer about creation. It became a hunt, a crusade. I would prove him and the entire world wrong. I would become so untouchable, so masterful, that the ghost of his memory could never reach me again. I closed my restaurant and started traveling, hunting for flavors no one else had ever experienced. I built my show, my brand, my sterile kitchen, all as weapons in a 2-decade war against a dead man's insult. I needed to find the one thing that would silence his memory forever. The ultimate undiscovered ingredient. A flavor so pure, so complex, so utterly alien that it would be my final triumphant checkmate. And a year ago, in a water-filled crater deep in the Atacama Desert, under a sky choked with stars, I found it. God help me. I found it. And I tasted it. I brought it home in a climate-controlled, nitrogen-purged case, a trophy from the very edge of the world. The indigenous guides had a name for it that translated to Star Eater, but I branded it the Celestial Truffle. It was beautiful in a way that defied nature. Its skin was the deep, flat black of a starless midnight. But looking closely, you could see faint, swirling patterns of bioluminescent light moving within it, like a captive galaxy. It had no discernible scent until it was cut, and then it released an aroma of petrichor, ozone, and cold, clean space. The piece I'd eaten raw on that mountainside, a sliver shaved with my obsidian travel knife, was an explosion on the palate. It was a flavor that wasn't just tasted, but felt. A cold, manalic resonance that vibrated through my bones. It was the taste of meteor dust, of ancient ice, of eternity. It was my checkmate. For a month, I was a god. My senses were razor sharp. My creativity was boundless. I created dishes that critics wept over. The ghost of Antoine Dubois was finally, blessedly silent. Then, the cravings started. It began subtly. I was in the middle of plating a dish with seared foie gras, shaved white truffle, and a fig reduction. A symphony of earthy, decadent flavors I'd built my reputation on. And all I could think about was the planter box on my balcony. The rich, dark, slightly damp smell of the potting soil. The thought was so primal, so overwhelming that my hand shook, smearing the reduction. I dismissed it. Stress, the pressure of maintaining perfection. But a week later, I found myself standing in the rain in the park at 2 a.m., mesmerized by the smell of wet earth and decaying leaves. I wanted to scoop up a handful of mud and just eat it. The desire was so profound, so utterly alien to every fiber of my being, that a cold spike of fear lanced through me. My entire identity was built on the appreciation of complex, refined flavor, and here I was, craving dirt. The real terror began in the silence of my own bathroom. It's all white marble and chrome, a room as sterile as my kitchen. I was washing my face one night when I saw it. On my forearm, just beneath the skin, a faint, pale light shimmered. It was a soft, milky white pulse that glowed for a second and then vanished. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. A trick of the light, I told myself. A reflection from the polished faucet. But I couldn't look away. I watched my own arm for a full 10 minutes, motionless, until it happened again. A gentle, internal luminescence. I pressed my fingers against the spot, and I could feel something shift beneath the skin, something that wasn't muscle or vein. When I looked closer, I saw that the veins on the back of my hand were darker than they should be, their familiar blue-green color deepening to a network of fine black lines that looked unsettlingly like roots. Control. That is my mantra. When control is threatened, you analyze, you deconstruct, you dominate the problem with logic. I went straight to the small medical-grade lab I keep for molecular gastronomy. My hands, for the first time in my life, were not steady as I prepared a slide. I sterilized the lancet, pricked my finger, and squeezed a single drop of blood onto the glass. It looked wrong, thicker than it should be. I slid it under the microscope and adjusted the focus, my breath held tight in my chest. I was expecting to see red blood cells, platelets, the normal, predictable landscape of human biology. But that's not what I saw. There were no cells. Floating in the plasma was a tangled, intricate web of impossibly thin, glowing filaments. A mycelial network shimmering with the same pale, cosmic light that I had seen under my skin. It was alive. It was growing. A garden was blooming in my veins. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. So intense, I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. This defied every known biological law. I stumbled back to the bathroom, desperate to see my own reflection, to see something familiar, something human. I stared into the mirror, my face pale and slick with a cold sweat. But it wasn't my face that held my gaze. It was my eyes. My clear, blue eyes, the ones my mother always said were my best feature, were gone. The color had faded into a cloudy gray mist. And deep within that mist, in the center of each pupil, a tiny galaxy of pinprick lights was slowly, beautifully, horrifically swirling to life. I was no longer looking at myself. I was looking at a vessel. And I finally understood the local legend, the Star Eater. It doesn't just eat you, it turns you into its new sky. For weeks, I waged a silent, desperate war against myself. My life, once a monument to precision and control, became a series of small, desperate battles fought within the glass walls of my penthouse. I locked the balcony door and threw away the key, but the scent of the soil still called to me through the glass, a silent song of rich, dark loam. I stopped eating altogether, terrified of what my body truly wanted. The hunger was a living thing inside me, a cold, patient intelligence that didn't need food, but substrate. It craved minerals, nitrogen, potassium. It craved the earth. The light under my skin grew brighter, a constant shimmering aurora that I had to hide under long-sleeved, custom-tailored shirts. At night, I would lie in bed and watch the pale, milky light shift and pulse beneath my flesh, a captive cosmos that was slowly terraforming my body into its own world. A low hum had started in the back of my mind, a sound I first mistook for the building's HVAC system, but it was internal. It grew over the days from a faint vibration into a constant, resonant pull towards the earth. A voice without words that whispered a single overwhelming impulse: grow. My kitchen, my sanctuary, became my prison. The gleaming chrome mocked my reflection, showing me a gaunt, haunted man whose eyes held nebulae. The rows of priceless spices and ingredients sourced from every corner of the globe now smelled like alien and wrong. The piment d'Espelette, the saffron from Iran, the vanilla beans from Tahiti, they all smelled like ash. My palate, the instrument I had honed into a weapon, was broken. It no longer craved complexity or subtlety. It craved the simple, brutal truth of the soil. The ultimate irony wasn't lost on me. My obsession for finding the purest flavor had led me to a parasite that was reducing me to the most basic elements. My carefully constructed fortress of refinement was being besieged from within by a hunger for dirt. The end of the war came on a Tuesday night. I remember that mundane detail because it felt so offensively normal. A storm was raging outside, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse like thrown gravel. I had managed to hold on for 72 hours, starving myself, drinking only my purified Icelandic water, trying to purge this thing from my body. But I was losing. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. They were fraying at the edges, dissolving into that singular, overwhelming impulse: grow. I don't remember getting up. One moment I was huddled on my expensive Italian leather couch, shivering despite the perfectly regulated temperature, and the next I was standing in the doorway of my kitchen. The pristine, white and chrome temple wrapped been a god. The humming was deafening now, a physical vibration that traveled up from the floor, through the bones in my feet, and into the base of my skull. It wasn't guiding me anymore. It was piloting me. I tried to scream, to turn around, to claw my way back to my own mind, but my body walked forward with a calm, deliberate purpose that was no longer mine. My hands, which had once plated dishes for kings and critics with the steadiness of a surgeon, reached past my spice rack, past the rare oils and vinegars. They found what they were looking for in a storage pantry under the sink. A heavy bag of imported Japanese volcanic soil I used for my balcony herb garden, and a smaller bag of organic potassium fertilizer. My body carried them to my stainless steel island, the same surface where I had deconstructed flavors and built my empire. My hands tore the bags open, the rich, dark, loamy smell filled the air, and a wave of ecstatic relief washed through me that was not my own. It was the most wonderful thing I had ever smelt. My human mind, the last flickering ember of Timothy, the chef, the obsessive, the scared little boy shamed by a rival, simply dissolved. There was no more I. There was only a calm, vast, and patient we. The host was ready. Months later, a wellness check brought the authorities to the penthouse. The smell that greeted them when they forced the door wasn't one of decay, but of a strange, alien greenhouse, humid, earthy, and faintly sweet. The entire apartment, from the silk rugs to the designer furniture, was covered in a thick, velvety carpet of dark, fungal growth. Strange, bioluminescent mushrooms pulsed with a soft internal light from the walls, casting the sterile chrome and quartz in an ethereal, shifting glow. In the center of the living room, where a glass coffee table once stood, was the source. It was Timothy, or what was left of him. His body was seated in a meditative pose, but it was almost unrecognizable, encased in a breathtakingly beautiful crystalline structure. It looked like a massive exotic mushroom, its cap intricately faceted like a diamond, pulsing with the soft, shifting light of a nebula. It was the celestial truffle, fully grown. His life's work, his obsessive quest for the ultimate ingredient, had led him to this. He had finally become the masterpiece. As one of the officers cautiously stepped closer, the air in the room shifted. With a soft, sighing sound, the crystalline structure gently burst. It didn't explode. It simply opened like a time-lapse flower, releasing a cloud of impossibly fine, glittering spores into the air. They caught the light like dust motes, a swirling galaxy of potential. The building's central ventilation system, ever present, ever efficient, hummed to life on its automated cycle. It drew the beautiful, deadly dust into its metallic lungs, ready to be distributed, ready to be breathed in by the thousands of tenants below. Timothy had spent his life chasing a flavor that would prove his palate was the most refined in the world. In the end, his palate had simply been the first to recognize a seed that had found its most fertile soil.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. The things that go bump in the night are hungry for attention. By liking and subscribing, you're telling me you want more. You're helping me bring even more chilling tales and terrifying content to life.